do pickles exist? And why are they still dominating our menus today? No chilled supermarket, no freezers, and no way to stop food from spoiling in the heat. Thousands of years ago, this was the reality for pretty much every civilization on Earth. Long winters, long journeys, months at sea, they needed to find a way to preserve their food. And one of the most important solutions that humans found was pickling. From Mesopotamians' cucumbers soaked in brine to the tangy, cute pickles that we have in burgers today, pickling has traveled across continents, empires, and countries for centuries. So we're going to explore where pickling came from, why it was so important, and how it has shaped cuisines. Most historians trace the origin of pickling as far back as 4,000 years ago around ancient Mesopotamia, which is now modern day Iraq. Farmers there grew large quantities of cucumbers, but these cucumbers would spoil quickly, especially in the hot climates. So people started preserving them in a salted brine, which is essentially salt and water to minimize the bacterial growth. This resulted in something that was entirely new. It meant that food was able to be preserved for months on end. Granted, the food then would probably be a bit more salty and sour, but it was revolutionary for its time. Pickling spread quickly through the ancient trade routes. Around 2000 BC, pickled food was starting to appear around the Middle East and the Mediterranean. The ancient Egyptians were quite fond of them too. They believed that the pickled food gave people strength and vitality. Pickles were also popular in ancient Greece, where people started to discuss its medicinal properties. The Greek physician Hippocrates was even recommending pickled foods to help aid digestion. But pickles weren't just medicine, they were perfect for travel foods. Armies, tradies, sailors would use pickled foods on their long journeys to survive. The Roman Empire particularly took to pickling. They pickled absolutely everything. Pickled cucumbers, vegetables, fish, anything that you could eat, they basically pickled. Pickled cucumbers were particularly popular. In fact, the Roman Empire, Tiberius, was said to have demanded pickled cucumbers every day of the year. He even had dedicated greenhouses to grow his cucumbers. It was the Romans that began to experiment with pickling, and not just putting things in salt brine. They included herbs and spices and seeds to develop flavors. Pickles! Pickling traveled with merchants along the Silk Road. This massive network of trade connected Middle East, Asia, and Europe together. And different cultures started to adapt their own sort of ways of pickling. In India, pickles known as achar, which were made with oil, spices, and herbs, and chilies, obviously. In Korea, of course, we would be remiss to not mention pickled fermented cabbage, which is the famous kimchi, which I love. The word pickle also has a very interesting origin. It likely comes from the Dutch word pekkel, which means brine. Dutch traders were heavily involved in pickling foods in the medieval period, and the word pickle eventually entered English and sort of obviously evolved into the word pickle. Today, pickling is everywhere. From American dill pickles on burgers to Japanese pickled ginger in sushi. From Indian lime pickle to German sauerkraut. What began as a simple survival technique has evolved into an entire category of cuisine. So next time you bite into a crunchy pickle, you need to remember you're tasting a food tradition that is over 4,000 years old. A tiny piece of culinary history preserved in salt, vinegar, and thyme. Thank you so much for Friday night dinner food history. I hope that you gained something out of it and enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you have a good weekend, and I will see you next week.